The second expression of Taurus is called effectiveness. To have an effect, to create an effect, to be effective, to make a difference, in other words. What we have discussed in the first 5 degrees of Taurus is power. And yet power of itself needs to be brought into effectiveness for there to be an ability to bring changes in a substantial way. And we have to remember that the first half of Taurus is all about substantiation. What was conceived of in Aries and tested to see if it was possible. The desire nature won potency in Aries. That was what Aries is all about. Now Taurus is saying, yeah, well, let's see what happens when that takes form. Let's substantiate this. Now, that word substantiation means making substance. And it also means checking out. And that's what Taurus does. It builds things. It takes ideas and energy and turns it into something substantial. It takes power to do that. And the power is there now. The first 5 degrees showed us how to get the power in the hands of the Taurus energy. And now we have to make it effective. So we look at the second expression from the 6th degree to the 10th degree to examine how exactly to become effective. How does Taurus do that? We begin with the image of the gorge, the bridge over the gorge. And this gorge represents separation. There's a very definite side here and a side there to a gorge, and there's a big gap in between the two. And this separation is, on the one hand, how we are separated from other people because we don't fully express our authenticity. We don't speak our feelings immediately, clearly and spontaneously. We don't allow our thoughts to portray, convey our ideas. We have a separation between us and others because of our inability to do those things. And that separation necessarily is a reflection of what's going on inside of ourselves. So the reason why we're separated from other people is because within ourselves there's an inner separation. And in fact, you can go one step further and say the reason we're separated from God is because we have this gorge within us, this great divide between how we express ourselves in the world and what we really are. This lack of truth, lack of self-acceptance as well. Because until we actually accept our own shadow nature as being okay, then nobody else will. And we don't have access to God unless we do that. There is nothing wrong with the shadow. The distorted expression of the shadow nature is of course a problem, but the problem lies with the distortion, not the energy itself. It would be the same with the light. There's plenty of expressions of the distortion of light. Lucifer is a word that comes from light bringer. You know, that's a distorted principle of light. So it is not only the shadowy energies that get distorted, the light energies do as well. And in fact, you could say that that's what religion is. So what we're trying to do with this bridging of the gorge is to bridge the inner separation that we have between what we really are and what we are thinking ourselves to be and presenting ourselves as. So it's not only the lie we tell the world, our glamour, it's also the self-delusion that we've made up to make ourselves feel good, or at least not so bad as we would otherwise feel. But that doesn't work. We have to build a bridge, and we have to deal with this inner separation by building that bridge. And when we do that in Taurus 6, we complete the springboard, shall we say, to move into the wisdom of Taurus 7 fully, the woman of Samaria. And she's a fallen woman, you know. she's sleeping with too many men and so on. But in fact, she's honest about that. She admits that to Jesus. Jesus comes and talks to her. And because she is doing that, because she's actually beginning the process of self-acceptance, she sees Christ consciousness. She has a spiritual breakthrough. So Taurus 7 for us individually is to have the awareness that when we heal the inner separateness within ourselves, the rift between truth and glamour, when we heal that, we have a tremendous spiritual breakthrough. We have access to Christ consciousness. And therefore, we must understand that it is by looking at our shadow nature and bringing the light, not only the light of consciousness, but the light of self-acceptance, self-forgiveness, these qualities, and that then echoes out into the world, and we forgive others and we accept others. It's necessarily an echo. And this is what Taurus 7 is about. It's about being honest about your imperfections and accepting, forgiving towards yourself and others. And then to have a spiritual breakthrough of the highest order. This is a real step forward when we're authentic. So here we see that truth leads towards spiritual knowledge. In the third image of the sleigh without snow, we find the expression here of the need for creative optimism. And the spiritual breakthrough that we have must always lead towards that. What is faith except creative optimism? Faith is not knowledge, is not certainty. If we have certainty about something, then we cannot develop faith. To develop faith, you must have uncertainty. There must be an absence of proof. And also, the need for faith has to arrive. So, when you face a situation where you just, on the face of it, don't have the right equipment for the environmental conditions, the sleigh does not appear to be a very useful bit of equipment when it's not snowing. And yet, the creative optimist would find how to make that so. In other words, Taurus 8 teaches us to make the best of things, to look for the silver lining in every cloud, to look for ways of getting around things, workarounds. And when you meet somebody and they aren't what you think or what you wanted, they disappoint you, then you have to look for something instead, something else. Because all of us, we project our desire, our fantasy onto a new person that we might meet. She's going to be loving, he's going to be interesting, that situation's going to be fulfilling. And maybe in the long term it turns around to be the way you wanted it in the long term. But in the short term there's very often disappointments. And we have to cope with them without allowing ourselves to indulge our disappointments, because that leads to the permanence of pessimism. That's to be avoided pretty much at all costs, really. Pessimism takes us down. Optimism is what we need. So, with this tool, this powerful tool of turning everything to our advantage, everything, every situation, every meeting, every person, everything, turn it around to our advantage. Make it work in some way to suit our needs. Then we can go to the next degree. Well, the next degree is Taurus 9. It's the Christmas tree. And the whole idea is Christmas time, is winter, solstice. It's the darkest time of the year. And the Christmas tree is the way that we bring greater light to the situation. It's not so much the tree as the fairy lights and the decorations and the baubles. They're all shining and brilliant. And a Christmas tree is a statement of light shining out from darkness. And this is what creative optimism does. It brings us to the position where we can bring light to the darkness. What that means really is that when somebody is a bit down and depressed and in a bad mood or can't quite find an answer, we help them. We encourage them. We give them inspiration. We give them a helping hand. We serve them. We're light bringers. And more than that, wherever we go, we're known to be a light energy. We always raise the situation. We always create an atmosphere of joy and pleasantness and lightness of being. This is our way of being. And we're moving away from now creative optimism as such and just being light. Being light and knowing that by being light, we engender light in other people. That's how they become light, by resonating with our certainty of light, our bringing light to the darkness all of the time as a way of being, as a personality characteristic. We are light bringers. Now in the image of Taurus 10, we have the Red Cross nurse. Very definitely a light bringer. Whereas it's at a higher dimension, isn't it? Here, the love that we bring in the form of optimism and light and cheeriness and joy and lightness of being, that tends to be on a personal level. You know, we're talking about our personality and so on. When we're moved to a higher level with the nursing image, the Red Cross nurse, these nurses, they go to places of particular need and somewhat greater likelihood of danger through illness or political difficulties locally or war, you know. And so we're moving away from the resonance of love on the personality level of self. I feel joyful and light, therefore you feel joyful and light, to a higher level of selfless love. We're taking love now from being a personality quality to being a sacred gift, almost a prayerful act. This is a high level of service where it's self-sacrificing. And we have to be very careful with this whole business of altruism and self-sacrifice, because no doubt is a high spiritual principle, no doubt about that at all. However, it carries risks with it. And the biggest risk is identification of the functionality of sacrifice as the same as martyrdom. And that's not the right word. The true sense of martyrdom is where you just let go of self and serve at personal cost, the highest personal cost, personal life. You know, you die. That's martyrdom. And yet it's come to mean something else, where there's this self-harm aspect of it. You allow yourself to be treated badly, martyred to a cause and so on, unwillingly and unconsciously, and that must be avoided. The teachings within some of the astrological texts that you find suggest that Pisces does this quite a lot, and they just give up their sense of self so much that they get treated without respect, and this is not to be endured, and that's not what we're talking about here. It's absurd to think of Taurus like that. Taurus just isn't like that. Taurus is very well boundaried, typically. And so we're talking about the highest level of service. Now, this must be self-serving in order for it not to be self-harming. Altruism itself is a false teaching. What is understood when you are in service at this high level is that it is to your own advantage to serve at that level. those of us who try to help others in whatever capacity as healers and teachers, or just helpful people who do voluntary work and so on, if we're not enjoying that, if we don't get something from that, then we need to stop, because it has to be an exchange on an energetic level, or it amounts to a form of abuse, one way or another. It could be self-abuse. It could be abuse of the other. And there's a way in which, I've seen this in mothers quite often, the mother serves the child, especially a son, too much, feeding him, giving him everything he needs, not making him grow up and take his own responsibility in life. And it's a form of abuse. The mother's need to be useful, to be required, to have a role in life, is put on to the child, and the child receives too much service from the mother, too much love, in a sense. I know that sounds a bit strange. How can there be too much love? But the kind of love we're talking about is not really true love. It's corrupted by the need of the mother, in the case that we're describing, to be loving. Now, if you're actually loving someone because you need to be loving, then it's kind of, is it love? It doesn't feel right, does it? It's an exchange of some kind. And what we're talking about here is not that. It's it's an exchange of some kind, insofar as the equation is that one needs serving and the other needs to serve. On that level it is, but it's not based on ego. It's based on the nurse wants to raise her spiritual level, to feel closer presence of spiritual realities. It's not particular to the individual whom she's serving. That's the sense in which we need to distinguish here. And so, if we're to see these 5 degrees as a batch together, which collectively represent the principle of effectiveness, we can see that we need to heal ourselves first, bridge the gorge, to have a spiritual breakthrough like the woman of Samaria, and find how to be optimistic in every situation and turn everything around to our advantage. That's the spiritual breakthrough that we have. And when we're doing that, we bring light. We just are light. We bring light. And we can raise that to the most effective level of all, is when, as light bringers, we're indifferent to whom we serve, because we know that service itself takes us to a higher level of light. And at that highest level of light, we are at our most effective. Food for thought, isn't it? That the best service we can offer the world to bring light is to get to that state of spiritual service, of serving God or people. I mean, it's not different. When they most need help, to serve the people that really need our help. And to do that, because it's a spiritual practice, not for any exchange particularly coming from them. The exchange is coming from God, really. We get our rewards in heaven. That's what that one means. And the point is that this is what makes our power effective. If we try and apply the power that we have without that, without raising our spiritual awareness to the highest level, eventually it becomes undone. Eventually. It might take a long time, it might not be obvious, but eventually powerful people that don't balance themselves in the spiritual sense eventually become undone. And we see this in our mythology, modern mythology, the films that we see in every single case, the bad guys get caught and punished. You know, I might have exaggerated a tiny, tiny little bit, but generally speaking, all of our collective mythology has us understand that if you're doing the wrong thing with your power, eventually you'll lose. There'll be a price to pay. That's what we've made up as our mythology and our reality, therefore. So the only way to be really effective is to use your power for good.